Have you ever wondered why the most intelligent people you know often choose silence? Why the colleague with the sharpest mind keeps their insights to themselves during meetings? Or why your most insightful friend withdraws when conversations turn serious?
The answer isn't just unsettling. It reveals something deeply flawed about the world we've built. We're not merely tolerating mediocrity anymore, we're applauding it. We've built a society where standing out is no longer admirable, but dangerous. This isn't just another rant about society's decay. This is an attempt to trace how we arrived at this point, and more importantly, how to push back against the current that drags us into sameness. Picture a meeting at work. Two team members present ideas. One offers a bold, visionary proposal that could redefine the company's direction. The other plays it safe, suggesting a familiar, risk-free approach. Guess whose idea gets accepted? If you chose the latter, you already understand how this game is played. Our culture has developed a strange unease with brilliance. Genuinely exceptional people unsettle others, not because they do harm, but because they reveal how average the rest of us have become. It's easier to dismiss them as arrogant or too much than to confront our own stagnation. This isn't limited to the workplace. Think about social settings. Who usually leads the conversation? Rarely the most thoughtful person. Instead, it's the one who fills the silence with noise, not depth. And when someone does attempt to elevate the dialogue by introducing something meaningful, what happens? Awkward silence, a quick shift in topic, or worse, a sarcastic jab. Oh, look who brought the philosophy degree. It's the same pattern at parties or casual hangouts. Try bringing up science, art, philosophy, or tech, and you'll see people slowly inch away. But talk about a celebrity scandal, workplace gossip, or reality TV. Suddenly, everyone's involved. We've built a culture where surface-level conversation is the standard. A culture that celebrates what's bland because bland doesn't threaten. Mediocrity has become the comfort zone, and shining too brightly is now treated as a social offense. But here's the harsh truth. It's not that people can't value depth, they've been conditioned to reject it. Admitting someone else is more insightful means confronting your own limitations. And that stings. Remember that one student in class who always asked the weird questions? Who dug deeper and wouldn't settle for textbook answers? They were probably labeled annoying, complicated, or just ignored into silence. Eventually, they stopped asking. That wasn't accidental. Our educational systems weren't designed to spark minds, but to normalize them. It's a quiet machine that turns curious children into compliant adults. The creative gets labeled a troublemaker. The emotionally attuned gets called weak. The thinker becomes inconvenient. This isn't just a flaw, it's intentional. Thinkers like Michel Foucault saw schools not as places of liberation, but of regulation. George Orwell warned of the same in 1984, that control begins not with violence, but with the shaping of young minds. Ken Robinson echoed it. We destroy creativity in the name of conformity. And the shift is subtle. First year, the child is endlessly curious. Second year, they question a bit less. Third year, they ask only when prompted. By the fourth, they stop questioning altogether. By year 5, the lesson is learned. Don't ask, just follow. Think back to your own education. How often were your good ideas sidelined for the sake of staying on track? How many times did you want to dive into something fascinating, only to be told, that's not part of the curriculum? Did school encourage you to think, or to comply? Here's a personal moment I remember. In class, each student had to anonymously write a question on a piece of paper. I wrote something simple. Do you believe there's life beyond Earth? The class laughed. The teacher dismissed it as silly. No one knew it was my question, but I remember the sting. Not from asking, but from watching a room, led by an educator, reject curiosity. Later, when we had to ask questions out loud, I repeated the same one. More laughter. The teacher said nothing. The student I asked shrugged, unsure. That was the lesson. Don't ask questions people don't know how to answer. This is the world we've inherited. A society shaped to reject the very people who could elevate it. Schools don't produce innovators by default. They churn out rule followers afraid of standing out. Who do you think you are? That question captures the spirit of our culture perfectly. In the past, those with talent were told, "Keep going, you've got something special." Today, the message is, "Stay in your lane, we're all the same." Independent thinking exposes the laziness of those who parrot the status quo. It's easier to mock the thoughtful than to start thinking for yourself. Our culture weaponizes irony and sarcasm to silence anyone who rises above the average. You've met this person before. The one who cracks a joke every time someone tries to get deep, who rolls their eyes at someone reading a book, who calls people pretentious for liking ideas that go beyond fast food content. They're not cruel on purpose, they're scared. Scared of realizing there are levels of thought they've never accessed. Watch what happens at social events. Someone starts talking about architecture, psychology, science, anything real, and someone jumps in, "Hey man, chill. We're here to have fun, not attend a seminar." Everyone laughs. The subject changes to a celebrity's dating life. The deeper voice goes quiet. And then there's the lie we love to tell ourselves, we're all equal. But what that really means is, come down to my level so I don't have to rise to yours. And the gifted, the insightful, the truly brilliant, they eventually get tired of being misunderstood. So they shrink. They mask their intelligence. They blend in. They dumb it down just to be accepted. But every time you hide who you are to be more palatable, a piece of you disappears. Eventually, you forget what it felt like to speak from the soul. You become a shadow of your former self, playing along in a theater of sameness. The idea that the best rise to the top is one of the biggest myths sold to us. Look around, are those in charge really the most capable? Or are they the most compliant? The ones who learn to play politics, say the right things, and maintain the illusion of competence. If we had real meritocracy, it would topple entire systems. Nepotism would crumble. Empty leadership would be replaced by those with real skill. The quiet genius would finally lead. But we don't reward brilliance, we reward predictability. I knew a designer once. Her concepts were unlike anything the company had ever seen. Her work was transformative, but she never got promoted. The ones who did, they recycled trends, smiled in the right rooms, and never challenged the status quo. Originality was too risky. Mediocrity, however, knows how to camouflage as excellence. You know the type, the one with flashy slides and buzzword-heavy speeches. But when it's time to actually deliver, nothing. They rise fast. They're easy to manage. Meanwhile, the true innovators sit in the background, invisible. Talent has been reduced to decoration, acceptable only if it doesn't disrupt anything. Truly brilliant individuals? They're seen as dangerous. They highlight inefficiencies, so the system buries them. It promotes those who know how to shine just enough, not more than their superiors. Scroll through social media. What do you see? Nuanced, mind-expanding content or shallow, recycled fluff? The answer is obvious and concerning. The modern brain prefers to be entertained rather than enlightened. The ones who make us think are pushed aside for those who deliver dopamine in 15-second clips. Quality loses to quantity. Reflection loses to distraction. Memes and cliches go viral. Deep ideas disappear into the algorithm's shadows. A professor can labor for months crafting profound, thoughtful essays, only to be met with silence. But condense those same reflections into flashy memes or bite-sized humor, and suddenly, the crowd comes rushing in. The deeper the insight, the smaller the reach, unless it's simplified beyond recognition. Social media didn't just level the playing field, it erased the scoreboard. Now, virality isn't earned by depth, but by simplicity. A 10-second clip with a hollow life tip reaches more people than a groundbreaking discussion on climate collapse. A recycled quote gets more attention than a conversation about the meaning of being alive. Algorithms reward ease. They don't encourage thought, they encourage clicks. Nuance drowns in a sea of oversimplification. Complexity is treated like a defect, and the impact is bigger than we realize. We're losing our collective taste for slowness, for mystery, for questions without immediate answers. Attention fractures. Patience dries up. Anything requiring focus feels like a burden. Even our perception of value is shifting. If it takes more than 30 seconds to grasp, it's dismissed. If an idea takes longer than 3 lines to explain, it's called too much. If a book exceeds 200 pages, it's labeled unreadable. We're building a generation allergic to the very thing life is full of: complexity. Kafka wrote for himself, knowing the world might never read him. Nietzsche died a pariah. Camus was denounced from all sides for refusing to serve any ideology. What do these thinkers share? The quiet isolation of those who saw too much too early. Those who are deeply perceptive eventually grow weary, not from arrogance, but from the constant need to dilute their thoughts just to be heard. It's like trying to explain color to someone who's only seen in grayscale. Exhaustion sets in, and so they withdraw. Silence becomes refuge, but it also becomes exile. How many great minds have locked their ideas in drawers because they were told, "It's too dense," or "No one will get it"? How many gave up, not because they lacked insight, but because the world lacked ears? There is a special loneliness reserved for those who see too clearly. The loneliness of observing patterns others overlook, of forming questions that make people uncomfortable. And when they try to engage, really engage, they're met with confusion, mockery, or resistance. It's not just the thinkers. Talk to a therapist at a party. They'll tell you, once people find out what they do, they're either avoided or treated like confession booths. Real conversation becomes impossible. Everyone either wants to run or unload. Lucidity isolates. In a world addicted to the obvious, the subtle is a threat. The more clearly you see the world, the harder it is to feel at home in it. But perhaps the most piercing solitude is not being alone, but having something meaningful to say and realizing no one wants to hear it. It's like shouting in a language no one speaks, in a world that chose to be deaf. Eventually, the gifted retreat. Their light becomes a private glow, never shared. Their wisdom dies with them, not by accident but by design. The elevation of mediocrity is not a glitch in the system. It's a feature. The more alike we are, our clothes, our opinions, our desires, the easier we are to herd. Uniformity makes leadership simple. Critical thinking, on the other hand, is disruptive. Imagine a world where people actually started asking real questions. Why do we work 40, 50, 60 hours a week for a lifestyle that doesn't fulfill us? Why do we accept terms our grandparents would have fought against? Why do we buy things we don't need to impress people we don't even like? That world would collapse, the one we live in now, because our current system doesn't need thinkers. It needs consumers. It needs people who equate self-worth with public approval. It needs workers who don't ask questions. A society full of philosophers is a nightmare for those profiting off the sleep of the masses. So we're trained early: be normal, fit in, don't question too much, don't stand out. A compliant population is a quiet one, and a quiet population is easy to govern. When someone dares to challenge the system with well-formed ideas, notice what happens. The person is attacked, not their argument. They're intense. They're arrogant. They think they're better than us. Labels replace logic. We've seen it play out again and again. Economists pointing out systemic inequality are dismissed as out-of-touch theorists. Philosophers are brushed off as too abstract. Artists are called weird. No one wants to hear what might shake their comfort. The result? The victims of the system end up defending it. They ridicule those trying to liberate them. They cling to their chains as if they're jewelry, because deep thought wounds. It forces a confrontation with ourselves, with our stories, with our fears. So most people opt out. They parrot cliches. They live on autopilot. Better the illusion of freedom than the discomfort of truth. Nietzsche once wrote, "Conviction is a more dangerous enemy of truth than lies." And it shows. Most people don't want truth, they want reassurance. They don't want insight, they want validation. I once knew a woman who blamed every failed relationship on her exes. When a friend gently suggested she consider her own patterns, she snapped, "So it's my fault now?" The conversation ended. So did the reflection. And the cycle repeated. This is why the masses fear the questioner, because he reveals that another way exists. And to admit that is to admit they've lived blindly for too long. Attacking the thinker is easier than facing the mirror. To reclaim lucidity is an act of quiet rebellion. It starts by mentally stepping back from the crowd. It means thinking for yourself even when that thought isolates you. It begins by releasing the need for approval. Not everyone's opinion is worth your energy. Not all feedback is rooted in truth. To resist is to develop habits that strengthen your inner life. Reading instead of scrolling, contemplation instead of noise, creating instead of consuming. You don't write, think, or speak deeply to be liked. You do it to stay whole, to keep from vanishing in a world that demands conformity. Because in the end, the most essential approval is the one that comes from the mirror. From knowing you didn't abandon your mind for applause. To be brilliant is to carry a hidden burden. To see more, feel more, question more. It's realizing you may never be fully understood. That your richest conversations might only exist in your journal. That solitude will be your most honest companion. Look at history. Van Gogh sold a single painting in his lifetime. Emily Dickinson kept most of her poems locked away. Galileo was silenced for speaking cosmic truth. And yet, long after their worlds collapsed, the world began to listen. So, is it worth it? That depends on your definition of worth. If you're chasing recognition, then no, but if you seek truth, authenticity, and integrity, then yes, endlessly. Clarity is both curse and key. Once you see, you can't unsee. But once you see, you can finally be. To live with awareness is to live with freedom. Freedom to be yourself in a world that fears difference. Freedom to think, to feel, to create without permission. Realize this. Identifying mediocrity isn't enough. What you do with that realization is what matters. You can scroll past this and return to the comfort of the crowd. Or you can rise quietly, defiantly, and decide to live awake. Every time someone chooses truth over applause, authenticity over approval, thought over conformity, they plant a seed. A seed for the next generation. A seed for a better future. And maybe, just maybe, your courage will awaken someone else's. And so, mind by mind, voice by voice, we fight back against the flood of mediocrity. We keep the flame alive.